Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here today and to discuss these important issues with you. At our summit, we had as one of our speakers Dr. Ledois from the University of Zurich. And he told a very interesting story about Zurich private bankers. Essentially in Europe now, people can use gold essentially as currency by having an account in a Swiss private bank. They get a credit card, they can swipe that credit card all over the world, or debit card, and they can then settle up at the end of the month. Anybody in the world can open such an account if they have the requisite net worth, except for the citizens of one country, and that's the United States of America. And so I thought that was very interesting in terms of Utah's action. This now prepares or lays the groundwork for Utah to perhaps implement what we would call the Swiss model and become a magnet for investment and flow of capital and commerce into the state. So we see some very positive implications coming out of this. I want to reemphasize this very important point that under current law, a citizen could, as was said here, transact in gold and silver. So let's say went out and bought a car for 10 gold coins that have a face amount of $500. I could turn around and pay my tax on $500 rather than on the $10,000 that was in the gold coin. And Tom here actually has a test case going on right now in Texas on that very issue. So it's a very significant and timely issue, and the fact that we've kind of focused attention on this dichotomy that we have in the U.S. with gold and silver specie coin on the one hand and in the paper Federal Reserve notes on the other, it becomes a very pressing issue for Utah. And so there's basically two ways that this could be addressed. One is the state could establish some kind of a mandatory exchange rate and say, okay, if you transact in specie, then you need to convert that to dollars based on some formula. The problem with that is it actually would put us at odds with the federal government, who's already established an exchange rate. In fact, if you go back to the drafting of the Constitution, it actually refers to the dollar in a couple of different places, which at that time was an understood set standard. And in the Coinage Act of 1792, Congress laid out exactly what the dollar is with specificity, and that holds to this very day. There's a statute on the books that says that a dollar is 371 1/4 grains of fine silver, which means that an ounce of silver costs $1.29. So that's really the constitutional exchange rate. So we'd be at odds with that if we were going to specify our own. The other alternative that's been alluded to, which I think really makes sense, is to allow for payment in specie, payment in kind. So if you have a transaction that involves payment with gold or silver, then you pay your taxes in gold and silver. I think that just makes the most sense. It's the most constitutional. It protects the taxpayer because it doesn't put the taxpayer in a position of being accused of being a tax cheat because they used the wrong conversion rate. If we're silent on it, then the taxpayer has to figure it out. They have to figure, okay, well, how am I going to convert this? I'll just do it at market value, and then he could be questioned on, what day of the week did you convert it, and so forth. So this protects the state by making sure that they don't lose any tax revenues, and it protects the taxpayer by making sure that when they make the decision to enter the precious metal economy using gold and silver as a medium of exchange, that they aren't forced by the tax laws to exit that economy and do a switch. So we would like to, Representative Galvez and I have discussed this at length and feel that this is really the appropriate way to go, but we're very interested in feedback from the committee on this point. So if the state were to adopt this specie payment alternative, then the one objection that can be raised is, well, this isn't a very efficient system. It creates, we'd have to create new systems, new kinds of perhaps institutions or methodologies to deal with that. And so we've consulted with a number of people in the financial industry and it's interesting, and you should be aware that as a result of the passage of HB 317, there are already efforts to establish gold and silver repositories that have special expertise in handling this kind of material, this kind of medium of exchange. So our proposal would be that this not create any additional burden or cost to the state. This would be something that could be outsourced to financial institutions or to commodity repositories, and they could handle the transactions. They could verify the specie, make sure that it's all, correct and assayed properly and so forth, and that they would be able to charge a reasonable fee to the taxpayer for that service. So just like when I prepare my taxes on TurboTax or any of those programs, I pay a fee for that service. And so we envision that this could be, now if the tax commission wants to keep it and they want to handle that all in-house, fine. But we believe, based on our initial research, that this should not create any additional cost or burden to the state itself, and that the taxpayers themselves can pay for that service. If I may, if you want to turn to the second to last page in your handout, you'll see that what we've actually monetized under HB 317 is all gold and silver coin ever issued by the United States government. So what we have is we have the pre-1965 that has a dollar face amount, and essentially equates to, the dollar face amount equates to $1.29 per ounce. And then under Reagan, as was alluded to earlier, we have $1 per ounce. And when you kind of put these two together, you find that you have the big problem of small change, which basically it's difficult to actually do a transaction in kind with what we have monetized thus far. There is one example, the Mexican Libertad, which has various denominations of in fractions of an ounce in silver. And that's really what you'd need for kind of the small change issue. But that's only one that exists in the whole world in terms of ounces. So we feel that it makes sense to look at monetizing coin that could be of private origin, perhaps produced within this state, that would have those correct denominations. And you can see that kind of laid out there. And on the next page, there's some examples of some technologies that are used to have small amounts of gold or silver that can be done in that way. So one provision that we're looking at, we'd be interested in your feedback on this, is how you go about doing that monetization. It seems like it would take some study to take in examples and look at various things and see what should be done. And one idea that we have discussed is the idea of designating a particular officer of the state or a committee or a group that could actually do that and would be empowered by the legislature to, by administrative rule, simply monetize whatever is going to work best in the economy. And so we'd be very interested in your feedback on that as well, if you feel that that would be a good direction to go. I think that these things will develop as we go forward, and as people kind of move into the precious metal economy. There'll be a certain momentum that will build where people want to kind of stay in that economy and not have to move back and forth between dollars and precious metals. So I think that these are things that we will see, and when we understand and look back and just recognize that the United States monetary system for 173 years was based on silver. And so really it's only for a relatively short time that we've gone off that standard. And people, my parents, my grandparents, they all used silver, especially in their day-to-day transactions, and it seemed to work fine.